fireplace with a flickering flame fire. Let's get crafting. Hello and welcome to the Battling Barrow and another little terrain craft video. Today we are going to be making these. These are fireplaces, which will be quite useful for various games. But not only are they, you can use them like that, but you can put a battery in and we've got a flickering flame in them. So these are surprisingly easy to make, so let's get crafting. The fireplace is made from 10mm, 2 bits 10mm foam that are 2 1/4 inches long by 1 1/8 wide, and the middle bit, one of the bits, has a chimney that is about 1 inch higher than the rest of the piece, and 1 inch wide. On the other piece, I will draw in a fireplace arch. This then gets cut out. For the arch bit, I'll use a hot wire cutter just for ease. Taking inspiration from RM Projects UK, I am going to pull apart this LED tea light because I want the bulb from it. So they're quite easy to come apart. As you can see here, it's just a case of pulling bits out until I've got the bulb and the battery. I'm going to straighten the legs and just figure out which leg is what using the battery. So you can just pop it in, and if it doesn't light up, it's the wrong way. If it lights up, that's the way it goes. Next, I want to work out where to put the battery, so I'm just going to temporarily assemble the pieces and just work out where I want the battery and draw around it. I'm going to come in with a knife and sort of carve around about battery thickness depth into the foam around the battery, and then score some crisscross lines into it in both sort of 2 different ways. Again, about the same depth. Then this will allow me to sort of carve a battery hole compartment out of the foam. I've done this on a few other videos, this kind of thing where I'm scoring a bit out, most notably the Portal of Power piece I made a few months back. Now I'm just going to come in with a sculpting tool and scrape out, gouge out the bits, and you can also push them into the foam as well if you like, just so you've got a little indent, battery shaped indent. Next, from the back, I'm just going to work out where the holes will go for the LED, so I'm just going to push them through the back and then push them through the front as well, just to make holes where the legs will poke through. And at this stage, I'm just going to test it by putting the battery in place just to make sure it all works. Next, I'm going to use my hot wire cutter to cut out the fireplace archway. Time for some brickwork pattern. To begin with, I'm going to go around the archway, remembering to do the inside pieces as well. So I'm going to go around the edge here and draw in the continuation of the bricks into the inside. I will then use the same pen to draw a nice brickwork pattern all over both pieces. To save time, you don't have to go over all of it, you can just go over the bits that will be seen, as the next stage involves gluing it and you won't see those pieces there. So just to give you a little example, and you don't have to worry about the top here because we're going to put a mantle onto it soon. So now I'm going to make the sort of fireplace half. This is just made from chipboard, which is the same width but ever so slightly higher, wider. And for the mantle, it's the same process but not as wide as you can see here. Next, for the mantle, I need to work out the where the chimney is so I can cut around that. So I'm just going to mark it in and then cut this little bit out. The half gets a brickwork pattern marked into it. the mantle gets a woodwork grain texture scored into it. The fireplace is then glued onto the hearth, and the mantle glued onto the fireplace. I use clamps to hold it in place as I'm using PVA, but if you use a hot glue gun you probably won't have to do this. And when it's dry it gets undercoated in black. The brickwork gets a dry brushing in a Grille. The wood gets a undercoating in this lovely dry bark by Citadel. It's probably one of my favourite colours from them. The brickwork then gets a sort of fairly heavy dry brush of a tan, as does the woodwork, but I go across the grain and not with the grain just to bring it out. I then give the whole piece a wash. The inner part gets a real heavy wash in there because that's where it's all going to be black with soot, and the rest of the brickwork just gets a more lighter wash, and I don't put any wash on the woodwork. What I am going to do now is take some scraps of balsa wood and cut them down into sort of lengths about an inch, 3/4 an inch, and an inch, and then I'm going to cut them down so they're roughly a thickness of 1/4 of an inch. When I've got that, I'm going to sort of carve off the edge to make them more rounded, and make these will become a stack of logs that will sit by the fireplace. These then just get glued into a pile. I started with 4 on the bottom, 3 on the next row, and then 2 and 1 and so on till you've got a pile of logs. Next up I need some logs that will be in the fireplace itself that will be either burning or burnt. So for this I'm going to cut out little logs shapes, slightly smaller than the logs I've made earlier, and they just get a wash of black all over. And whilst that black wash is still wet, I come across with a brown wash as well because they are logs, and this will give a surprisingly nice burning log colour effect. Back to the log pile, I'm going to use some contrast wildwood just to paint the bark on them. One step I did forget to do here, so if you don't, is to just rough up the edges of the I'm painting here to give it a bark texture. You don't really notice, but it will give it an extra bit of dimension if you do. It's now time to push the LED into place. On the back you want to push the bit that's more towards the centre of the hole over, and push the other bit over ever so slightly, and then what we'll do later on is slip the battery in between both of these. I'm just going to use a bit of hot glue just to hold that battery into place. And then going to hot glue our burnt logs sort of inside the fireplace and over the LED to try and hide it ever so slightly. Next we need a fireplace grill, so I'm going to use this screening that I sometimes use for leaded windows. This is just sort of insect screening that goes over your door. I'm going to cut a strip that's about, say, just over 1/4 of an inch, under 1/2 an inch wide, and just making sure that it's very difficult to explain that it has spikes sticking out the top and it doesn't have a line at the top. So I don't know if you can sort of see here, so the bottom bit is what I'm after, not the top bit. I'm just going to cut the rest of that off, and then I'm just going to eyeball the size of how much I need by temporarily putting it in. So I'm going to glue it onto the inside of the fire there. It will curve round and the other bit will glue onto the other side. Hopefully you'll get what I mean. It's quite difficult to explain, but hopefully you'll see from the video what I'm doing. So I then come in with a bit of hot glue to the inside wall and glue this in. So it can be a bit fiddly, so I'm going to use a sculpting tool just to help get it into the correct place before the glue dries. And then I will repeat the same for the other side. And that's the fireplace grate done, and I can put the battery in and you end up with this lovely looking fireplace with burning fire if you want your fireplaces on, lit. And that's it for another video. Let's have a look at them all set up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the patrons for making these little terrain videos possible. Till the next one, guys, take care. The party have returned to the castle to report their findings. It has been a cold, damp journey. As they reached the main hall, there was a fire lit, so they stopped to warm themselves.